KidneyCAN's a nonprofit organization with the mission of putting an end to kidney cancer. We want to accelerate a cure, and we do that by focusing on advocacy, research, and patient education. Advocacy Day is our attempt to bring people from across the country, a small grassroots army, if you will, of kidney cancer stakeholders, and we bring them together, we train them, and we talk about the issues, and we all go up to Capitol Hill and meet with our elected representatives.
What we want to do is not only just raise awareness, but raise the funds for research.
It is an opportunity for someone to, at a higher impact, talk with congressmen, senators, and their staff in regards to funding for cancer research, specifically kidney cancer research.
While this year will look different as we connect via Zoom with our elected representatives, the mission remains the same: to engage and educate policymakers on the needs and the urgency around kidney cancer research funding.
I'm really looking forward, once again, hoping to make an impact in research funding for kidney cancer, and this is one way that I can contribute.
We have found that these days have been very productive in getting the attention of Congress.
We're advocating for an increased funding at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, as well as through the KCRP, the Kidney Cancer Research Program.
The advocacy has paid off. We got involved and helped that line item grow, and we hope it continues to grow in terms of the dollars dedicated specifically to kidney cancer research.
No experience necessary. That's our tagline. We give an entire toolkit to the advocates so they're ready to go. And it even has a script if they want to use it. We've put some scientific information in there that's not real in-depth. We give a lot of facts and figures, and we give some do's and don'ts.
These people are wonderful, and they help you through everything. And we need you.
Your voice counts. Your story is important. We hear repeatedly the congressional offices, everybody's touched by cancer in this country. And so you can make a connection, tell your story, tell what's going on, and advocate for our position.
So much more work needs done. Somebody's got to do it. The more voices, the more awareness, the brighter the future.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Hope you're all doing well out there. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Brian Lewis. I'm the president of KidneyCAN. Just wanted to welcome everyone from around the globe that's attending today. We have a really exciting show, and I know you don't want to see me very long, so I'm going to do some real quick housekeeping. First of all, we're really excited to have 4 experts with us today. We're going to be talking about GU 21, which was a recent meeting that was held that has some of the latest trial information. And for trials, for folks that don't know out there, a clinical trial is when we take a new or proven approach to research, and then we try to come up with a new approach and compare that to one another, just real quick. But today we're going to hear from 4 of those experts, and they're going to bring it down to the patient level so we can really understand what took place recently. Next off, we're going to have questions and answers from the audience here later on at the end of a couple of quick speeches by everybody. So stand by, those who are standing by to ask your questions, get ready when we get to that portion of the show. You can also put your questions in the Q&A box on this webinar, so please do that. We'll try to have a discussion and answer some of those questions as well. I also have to give a shout out to all of our industry colleagues out there. Thank you for joining us today. We couldn't do all this without you, but we also know that we couldn't complete a lot of clinical trials if we didn't have your support there as well. So thank you for that. And now I'm really proud to introduce our lineup here. First off, real proud to have Hans Hammers, who's the Associate Professor of Internal Medicine at University of Texas Southwestern. He's going to talk to us a little bit about IO or immunotherapy, as well as some of the open trials that are out there. Hans, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Brian. My pleasure.
Great, great. Next up, we have Tian Zhang from Duke University, who's joining us. Tian's going to have some really exciting stuff to talk about regarding the summary of the new HIF-2 alpha and what's going on there. I can't even put it into words, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Tian. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Great. Third up is Dr. Brian Shook, all the way from UCLA. surgeon out there who's joining us. He's going to talk to us about rare subtypes and also some of the subtype papillary information that's been updated. Brian, I think you might be on mute at the moment, but really appreciate you joining us today.
Great, thanks, Brian. Great video, very inspiring.
Great, thanks. And then finally, Dr. Tony Schwery, he's going to get us kicked off. Dr. Schwery is the director of the Lank Center for Genitourinary Oncology at Dana-Farber in Boston. And Dr. Schwery is going to share some really exciting results about what a lot of you have probably heard about, what's called the pembro-lenvatinib combination, and we're eager to hear about that. So on that note, thank you, Tony, for joining us, and you're going to kick us off. So let's get started. We'll do your first segment, and then we'll introduce the next round. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, KidneyCAN and Susan and everyone for all what you do. We really thought about all getting together with all our patient, our advocate, people interested in research to see really what's happening. We just don't need another Zoom call, I get it. But what's happening in kidney cancer, there's nothing better than the GU ASCO meeting in San Francisco that we go to. And this year it happened virtual. There was a lot of update that built on other meetings that put trial in perspective. So one thing I wanted to talk about is some of the randomized trial that were presented for the first time. A study, a 3-arm study, brought in a potential new option in kidney cancer. A study that randomized patient to 3-arm. One arm has an immune checkpoint inhibitor, immunotherapy by the name pembrolizumab, plus lenvatinib, a new oral drug somewhat approved in kidney cancer, but in later stage, versus the same combination with lenvatinib, but with everolimus. So lenvatinib, everolimus, experimental arm in patients that have not seen any treatment yet, versus sunitinib. This was probably one of the last studies that had sunitinib as a control arm. And the study clearly showed, and was published at the same time in the New England Journal of Medicine, that the combination of the immunotherapy and lenvatinib, so pembrolizumab and lenvatinib, is vastly superior. So endpoint like overall survival were met. The responses were over 70%, 16% of patients, the highest to date, had a complete response. So hopefully this will be an option. The experimental arm actually that did not have the immunotherapy, the other experimental arm had actually showed also benefit. The responses are higher, what we call progression-free survival, in a way the time on treatment without the disease growing, also better, but the survival endpoint, meaning people live longer, has not reached. So 2 out of 3 endpoint. And hopefully this is the last trial with sunitinib. We had major improvement in kidney cancer to a degree that the trial will open, another one will close. And when the combination of 2 immune checkpoint inhibitor, nivolumab and ipilimumab, got approved, all these trials were half done or almost done. So we're glad now that we're not going to have sunitinib as a control arm in a new trial. And Dr. Hammer's going to talk about really the next generation of clinical trial that we're building on. I know Dr. Zhang is leading one of them. So it was an exciting meeting with this. The combination I talked about is not, approved yet, but hopefully the message here, it will be, and provide patient another option. We want more options. That's what we want really. Now, along the same line, there's a study with another combination of another immunotherapy, immune checkpoint inhibitor by the name nivolumab and cabozantinib, a targeted drug which was presented at the European meeting, also virtual in September, but was updated overall during this meeting by Dr. Sella and Motzer, and showed consistently that after more follow-up, the survival benefit and the advantage of that combination, it was only 2-arm trial against sunitinib, also persisted, and some very intriguing and compelling quality of life. Quality of life, also called patient-reported outcome. So for some of you who were a patient, were part of a trial, these are the questionnaire you fill either online or a tablet, or just sometimes by writing, that tells you how the patient at each visit are feeling in general. Those are questions that the patient tell us rather than us grading the toxicity. So it's, the other way, and that's the voice of the patient. These are very, very important. And also here in this trial called Checkmate 9ER, continued to show benefit from the combination over sunitinib. There was also an update about another drug that is not yet FDA approved, been around for some time, by the name tivozanib. And that drug is a well-tolerated drug, was compared to sorafenib in later line treatment, third line treatment, and showed that the responses are better, the patients stay on treatment, longer. So these are the major trial I can think of in the clear cell RCC. That's the most common type of kidney cancer, 80% or more. Really was a very important meeting, I think, and I'm glad we're all talking about the advances and having that dialogue. Back to you, Brian.
Sorry, thanks, Tony. Appreciate that. All right, well, next up, we're going to hear from Dr. Zhang. If you wouldn't mind, if you want to come up on screen and unmute, we'd love to hear from you about the latest with the HIF-2 alpha.
Sure. Thanks so much, Brian. At GU21, we saw 2 trials with a very new agent that inhibits the HIF-2 alpha oncogene. This came certainly out of the Nobel Prize winning Dr. Kalin's lab. And so we saw both an update of belzutifan, this is the HIF-2 alpha inhibitor by itself, as well as in combination with cabozantinib. So I'll talk about the trial that was just on its own first, and then we'll talk about the combination. So by itself, belzutifan was given to about 55 patients, all with treatment refractory clear cell kidney cancer. And we saw about 25% of those patients, so 1 in 4, who had a good objective response, but a good disease control rate. So stable disease or better, about 80% of patients had disease control. And, we did see some toxicities of note. On target toxicity is some hypoxia and dyspnea, so difficulty with shortness of breath. And then we did see also some anemia that was very common, as well as fatigue, but pretty well tolerated. And then Dr. Choueiri presented the new data from the combination study of belzutifan, the HIF-2 alpha inhibitor, with cabozantinib. So cabozantinib's been around for a while. We know it in the refractory space as effective for clear cell kidney cancer, and also in the upfront space in combination with nivolumab. But Dr. Choueiri and his colleagues tested it in combination with belzutifan, and mostly these were second and third line treated patients who were refractory to first line VEGF inhibitors, as well as immune checkpoint inhibitors. Some had prior combination of VEGF with immunotherapies. So there were 52 patients treated, and the objective response rate was pretty promising, about 22%, but significantly, I think the disease control rate was even higher at 90%. So 9 out of 10 people had some stability of disease. And certainly they were well tolerated. About a quarter of these patients had some dose adjustment, and about 15% discontinued cabozantinib, 12% discontinued belzutifan during the course of treatment. So very well tolerated. The median progression-free survivals, or time until progression, was about 16 months, which was also very promising. So I think both of these studies highlights to us that belzutifan certainly has disease activity for clear cell kidney cancer, and we're excited to see it move forward in future clinical trials. Thanks, Brian. Back to you.
Great. Thanks, Tian. I really appreciate that. Next up, we're going to hear from Dr. Brian Shook from UCLA. Brian, I know we have a lot of folks in the subtype category out there that want to hear from you. So looking forward to hear what you have to say.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. So this year's ASCO GU, we had some exciting news. The rare histologies have usually been left kind of forgotten about, and our patients really want and need new treatment paradigms. We had one of the few randomized trials that was presented, the S1500 for papillary kidney cancer. This was a cooperative group trial which randomized patients with papillary histology to 3 MET inhibitor arms versus Sutent. Sutent has been the de facto standard basically after showing some potential benefit versus an mTOR inhibitor through a couple trials, ASPEN or ESPN. And the trial did have a clear winner. This was 4 arms, and 2 arms unfortunately closed early for futility, which one was crizotinib and the other was savolitinib. Both are not FDA-approved agents. But Sutent and cabozantinib continued, and cabozantinib was the clear winner with improvement in delaying progression. The progression-free survival was 9 months as opposed to about 5.8 months. There was improved response rates in those who received cabozantinib versus Sutent, and again, both agents were had similar rates of toxicity. It's drugs that are already FDA approved, but clearly it establishes cabozantinib as the current standard of care for really papillary kidney cancer. Clearly, it's not a home run for our patients. We also need to tease out which patients will have really good response. This was a heterogeneous group of patients, and work is ongoing to molecularly characterize them. And then just the final thing I'll touch on, there were 2 abstracts that were focused on papillary histology and immune therapy. One was this Checkmate 920 study, and the other one was a Unison study. Basically, they established further another large cohort other than this Keynote 427B study, which shows that probably about 20% of our papillary kidney cancer patients respond to immune therapy, and or other variant types of histologies can respond. So our goal is then probably trying to integrate where this will fit into the treatment paradigm. There is a future study where they aim to maybe build upon this S1500 backbone to maybe add in immunotherapy. But a lot of work to be done, a lot of good things, but a lot of new questions. Thanks, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Really appreciate that. I know that was a telemarketer call, so good thing you didn't pick that up. Next up, Dr. Hammers, we wanted to hear from you, wanted to hear about what's going on in immunotherapy as well as with some of the open trials.
Hey, Brian, thank you so much. First of all, beautiful video in the beginning. Such a great organization. So, let me take a step back, actually. Let me talk a little bit more about immunotherapy, how we use it today. Maybe that's going to also help with some of the questions later on and some of the discussion. So the main therapy or the main approach in immunotherapy today is that we take breaks of the immune system. So it's really the realization that led to the Nobel Prize of 2018 in medicine that cancer actively suppresses the immune system. And I would say the main pathway that we target in 2021 really is the PD-1, PD-L1 pathway. And we have numerous antibodies now targeting PD-1, PD-L1, they're all the same pathway. And most of the drugs like, Keytruda, pembrolizumab, nivolumab, these are names that you hear everywhere on the news. There are also other antibodies such as avelumab, for example, and others that are also getting more now broader attention as they're becoming approved in kidney cancer or other diseases. So there's a bunch of these antibodies that target this particular pathway, and they're being used in combination. The other leg of immunotherapy is an antibody that inhibits a pathway that's a little bit different called CTLA-4. And the representative for that one, for example, that's FDA approved is ipilimumab or Yervoy. By itself, it was never that convincing. Response rates typically as a single agent are in the range of 10-15%. But when you combine it with PD-1, that really allowed us to have some nice response rates, in this case for Nivo-Ipi, this combination of PD-1, CTLA-4, 42% for patients with an aggressive form of kidney cancer. And so, these are two different drugs. PD-1 by itself is typically really well tolerated. The need for corticosteroids to suppress the immune system is like 10-15%, but the IPI adds something to it. So there's some more toxicity autoimmune-wise, a higher chance of ending up on prednisone, like around 35% of patients for this combination, versus around 10-15% of patients who get PD-1 or PD-1 TKI combinations end up on steroids. So those are the main differences. And there is also different follow-up for the pure immunotherapy. We have more follow-up for the PD-1 TKI combinations as they are trickling in. Very exciting early data, but we still have to see some of the long-term benefit with those combinations. So those is really the language that we speak of. And also the side effect profile is different. These side effects don't go away by themselves. And there's a significant amount of education that needs to take place between patients and physicians about when to engage. So the trials that we are looking at in the future is partially also looking, can we use these things better? What do we need to learn? For example, understanding it. Dr. Zhang, for example, leads a national trial that starts with nivo-ipi, and then in patients who don't really respond well, at least, or not the response, but also not totally progressing on disease, we may add in cabozantinib, for example, to then boost the benefit from this particular combination. So a trial is called the Pedigree trial. Certainly something to look at if you think about nivo-ipi combinations. Other combinations are asking, well, these dual doublet therapies are here. What about triplets? What about combining TKI and PD-1 and CTLA-4? And so there's a trial called the Cosmic 313 that combines the cabo-nivo backbone with the CTLA-4 inhibitor. But there are also other CTLA-4 inhibitors in development in kidney cancer. For example, there will be combinations coming with lenvatinib, pembrolizumab, and the CTLA-4 inhibitor. There will be combinations coming, another triple therapy where the HIF-2 inhibitor that you just heard of from Dr. Zhang will be added into this particular cocktail. So it's really important, before you engage, even with these very promising broad opportunities for newly diagnosed patients, to ask about the clinical trial. I think that's really critical. Before we started here, Brian was saying, with all this COVID and trials and vaccines, I think, people start to understand more and more that clinical trial really is hardcore modern science that allows us to make rapid progress. So at each stage that you are newly diagnosed, progressing on a certain therapy, please always inquire locally or with institutions that you're familiar with about potential clinical trials. Other immunotherapies are coming, looking at cellular therapies, for example, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, lymphocytes that are being removed and then altered to potentially be better equipped to go after certain tumors. They are coming in kidney cancer, such as CAR T cells, for example. There's a CRISPR trial that Dr. Parr leads. And there's some very interesting opportunities depending on where you are with your disease. But my main message really is look at clinical trial opportunities. Even for second and third line, there are opportunities right now, for example, to get benefit from HIF-2 inhibitor exposure, a drug that may be approved for kidney cancer in a year or two. So there are really some very nice opportunities, and patients should inquire. And I would say with that, I stop and just turn back to Brian. Thank you so much.
Great, Hans. Thank you very much for that update as well. I think what we're going to do now is we're going to transition to start doing the questions and answer session. And so I think our first section of questions is going to be around the entire TKI-IO approach and the latest news there. And so I think we've got Adam from Boston on the line who might have an extra party with him, but maybe not. So Adam, good to see you. You might be, you're not on mute now. All right, let's hear it from Adam. Come on.
All right, thanks so much, Brian. My name's Adam Stern. I'm a patient with metastatic renal cell carcinoma. Brian was just referencing that just under 4 months ago, my wife and I had our second child. And so I said, I don't know if I'll be, there might be a screaming baby in the background as I ask this question. But so it goes to the point of saying thank you to Brian, thanks to all the doctors and the researchers who are here and everywhere doing the research that's trying to extend our lives. and make our lives better. My son literally would not exist without the research that has been going forward at an incredible pace over the last several years. So thank you for that. My question is that, we're all very impressed with the data of these combination therapies, but we know that many patients will eventually progress. And so my question is how will you approach treatment for patients after having had a VEGF IO combination? Is a similar combination, but with different medications potentially indicated in the future?
Who wants to give this the first crack? Tony, we haven't heard from you in a minute.
Oh, we have not. Adam can ask me this anytime. I think, Adam, the bigger question here is what drugs were used. So you probably won't use, second line. The biggest question, beside the new target and everything and what to bring, to me, even if one program doesn't work, is first of all to see, is there any room for something outside systemic therapy? Is the patient tumor growing in a place where you can remove it, you can radiate it, etc.? You'll be surprised how many times it is, working well, except in one place. Second question that several of us are trying to answer, Hans and I, in two trials we're trying to answer here, is do we still need to use an immune checkpoint inhibitor as part of the second line regimen? There is no evidence of that, by the way, none. Because the treatment that were used part of an immune checkpoint inhibitor after the tumor grew on the first one are all plus something else. So it can always be, depending how you look at the glass, it could always be the second thing, especially a TKI. So we are launching two studies to answer those questions, where the patient will get a TKI only versus TKI and another immune checkpoint inhibitor. In the absence of that, I have done a lot of times nivolumab and ipilimumab combination based on a study we did that showed a 15% durable responses. Although people challenged me and said this could be the ipilimumab, the CTLA-4 only, and I can't say no. So I think the bottom line here, Adam, is that folks have many options. And we wish we have enough patients to test every idea in a randomized fashion.
I could chime in too. I really think it is a journey of treatments, right? So we have patients on frontline, but then we always have to think about what happens when disease grows and develops resistance. And so whatever we're using frontline and there's some resistance occurring, we're probably swapping that out for second line. And it kind of depends on timing of how a patient becomes resistant over, is it within 3 months to their next scan, or is it over a year and a half, 2 years, how they're responding to their frontline treatment, what we might rotate in a landscape where there's so many effective treatments. It is really great for patients that we have options. And I think it's really important for patients to kind of talk through what are the right options and what they've seen already, what kind of timing it is, and then what to do next with their oncologist.
Wonderful. Hans or Brian, anything to add there before we go on to the next question?
No, I think that's great. It really depends on the stage, when the patient progresses, etc. But again, clinical trials, getting second opinions never hurts at the time when you make a decision.
Great. Well, I'm going to read off the next question we got from a smart patient, Z15 in New York City. So will the pembro-lenvatinib combo be quickly dominant as first line for appropriate patients once approved? And second follow-up is, should I ask for it if I need treatment? We'll turn it over to Hans or Brian, since you're sort of next in line.
Good. So well, the good news is we have some diversity in opinions sometimes, but the truth is, looks is not everything. The pembro-lenvatinib, the top line data is fantastic. I mean, there's no doubt about it. If you had to make a combination like this, it looks great. 70% response rate, 16% CR rate. But the truth is, while these are very impressive numbers and patient will do really well up front, there's no doubt about it, there are other issues that you need to consider. One that's very important in my practice when I discuss it with patients is, what's the potential long-term outcome? What do we know about this regimen? What do we know about how patients are doing, 3, 4, 5 years from now? We have other combinations such as nivolumab, ipilimumab, where you don't have the big bang up front where you get the huge high response rates, but there are patients who do extremely well, are often off therapy, 35% of patients or so, years after starting therapy. So that's really what patients sometimes want, is to potentially come off therapy, do really well for long periods of time. In those data sets, we still have to see if there's something differentiating between the different TKIs. The next one is the quality of life. If you are, let's say, anyways, always a PD-1 TKI giver, if you will, that's your common combination that you go to. Cabo-nivo is a very active combination. In fact, it was tested on somewhat more challenging patient populations, in my sense. Appears to be somewhat better tolerated. I'm not sure why, but it appears that way, to be better tolerated. It starts with a lower dose, whereas the lenvatinib pushes the dose, has lower liver toxicity. So, I don't think you can do anything wrong starting with any of these combinations. I don't think one of them will dominate. I think there will be a diversity with how we use them. I don't think they're going to be the difference between, having huge benefit or not. One last thing is the CR rate that I want to quickly mention. CR rate, complete response, is a very difficult endpoint because it totally depends on if a radiologist thinks a little smidge on the CAT scan is cancer or not cancer. Very varied, if you will, in magnitude. It's much better to see what happens with patients who get a deep response. Can they do extremely well? And quite frankly, you don't need to have a CR, complete response, to do extremely well with even just deep responses, 50% or more with nivo-ipi, for example. So take it with a grain of salt. It looks great. Many active combinations. That's the beauty.
Got it. Great. Thank you, Dr. Hammers. Brian, we're going to move over to rare subtypes so we can get a couple of questions in for each of your speeches that you made. And then we're going to come back to some of these topics again. So I'm going to jump into, we have another patient we're going to bring up now from El Paso, California. Javier, are you there? Yeah, there you are. You're on mute. I think you're about ready to come off. Ask your question, please.
Hey, hello. Yes, I am Javier Garcia. I am from El Paso, Texas, actually.
Okay.
I did a 12-hour monthly trip to MD Anderson in Houston. I was diagnosed with stage 4 sarcomatoid kidney cancer. My question is, what new advances in treatments are there for the rare subtype sarcomatoid? And does sarcomatoid respond well to immunotherapies? Thank you so much for all your hard work and everything you do for us as patients.
Let me take that, Javier. First of all, I didn't know El Paso. I thought El Paso, Texas. Now I know El Paso is California, and probably El Paso in every state. But, and glad to see sarcomatoid patient, like you now doing well. I think this was a vexing problem for us because with the new, I call them the targeted treatment we happen, patient had sarcomatoid in their tumor. That's somewhat an aggressive histological subtype that can exist with any type of kidney cancer. Did not do well, but with immunotherapy, they're doing much better. And with this combination of the two drugs Dr. Hammers talked about, the nivolumab, ipilimumab, the complete response is something we have never seen before, is around 20%, between 18 and 20%. And the reason for that, and we had a recent paper published with Dr. Bakuni and Van Allen, that, despite there are a lot of programs, molecular programs in the tumor that show aggressivity, at the same time, there's a lot of immune permissive in microenvironment and inflamed tumors. So the T cell, the PD-L1 you hear about, the antigen presenting machinery, all these that favor an immune response to immunotherapy are present there. That could explain in part this. And we looked at cell line data and they recapitulated the human tumors. So I think immunotherapy is the way to go in sarcomatoid tumors. Patients are doing very, very well. And my opinion is the combination of nivolumab and ipilimumab, but we're still not satisfied, and hopefully we'll add something on it. On the Cosmic 313 study, we're gonna look at that subtype to see if adding cabozantinib also gonna result in more complete responses and overall partial responses.
Thank you, Tony. Brian, did you have anything to add on that?
No, I mean, I would say that there's a lot of molecular pathways which are active. So, we hope that our patients have complete responses, but if those eventually patients respond, I think, papers from, the different groups studying sarcomatoid biology hopefully will provide insights into what maybe could be heading other types of approaches in the future.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Javier, thank you for your question. Our good friend Deb Maskin's out there. We got a question from Canada. What trials or treatments would you recommend for metastatic papillary patients at this time? Brian,
yeah, I think this S1500 trial establishes cabozantinib as really the standard of care in the community, but immunotherapy is super exciting, and there's several trials which have shown that there are responses. How do you add to that backbone? I will say that, this past week, there was in our SWOG team a concept put forward adding just that immunotherapy to cabozantinib in a randomized fashion. But the other work from groups of Tony, Tian, and Hans and others looking at cabo and atezo, other types of combination targeted and immunotherapy. I think that'll be really exciting to see it add into the regimen.
To add, the CONTACT-03 trial, I believe, is open and available, and it does allow papillary renal cells. And this is for treatment refractory, but it's cabo versus cabozantinib with atezolizumab in second line. And so for any patient who has metastatic papillary, kind of thinking about second line treatments, that would be a very, very attractive study to find a site close to you.
And the other thing is 30%, 40% of papillary patients have alteration in a gene by the name MET. So here, despite cabozantinib, for example, hits MET among other receptors like the VEGF receptor. If you have a drug that is only hits MET, it will very likely have the better side effect profile. So we have tried in the past using drugs like savolitinib and other. The side effect profile was better than sunitinib. We have not able to finish accrual on that study, but hopefully now we can think about other studies where we can bring to the selective MET inhibitor something like immunotherapy, which works in papillary renal cell cancer. I think that will be good from a quality of life perspective.
I just want to say that molecular characterization of these types of tumors are really important. Some of them might be HLRCC tumors, some of them might be translocation tumors, and if we could better understand them, there might be studies open for the even more rare subtypes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. We're going just to be considerate of all the segments here. We're going to bring up Corey Kettler here. Corey's from Florida, and she's going to ask a question probably to you, Tian, about the HIF2 alpha. Go ahead, Corey. You're on mute, and we're going to have to get you unmuted here. There you go. You're live.
Thank you very, very much. First, I wanted to let you guys know I'm very proud to be here with all the superstars. When I told my oncologist that I would be here, he was shocked. But my question is, I'm interested in hearing about the trial opportunities for patients with prior treatment, especially with the HIF2 alpha or tivozanib, because of the milder side effects.
Sure, I think belzutifan certainly is promising and offered a lot of disease stability. So it did seem pretty well tolerated. I think people need to kind of watch out for some of the lower oxygen, shortness of breath, anemia type of side effects, but certainly seemed very promising in the trials that were presented. From the perspective of tivozanib, it was also a very good study that was presented. The TiVo3 data was very promising and does show disease activity for tivozanib. Tony, do you want to add on about tivozanib?
Please.
We got you on mute, Tony.
First, I need to unmute. Second, I can talk. I think, despite some of the, treatment we have that are more promising and new, they're not kind of curative, but they do often, offer other options. Tivozanib is one that hopefully will get approved based on a study. It's a tolerated agent. The HIF2 inhibitor certainly merits a lot of talk because in part, the work led to the Nobel Prize in medicine in 2019. And so far, the experience in it has been, with the new generation one, have shown the response rate 25% in a population of patients that had, tumor has grown on multiple lines of treatment. Dr. Bauer updated that more recently. And the interesting thing about that drug, belzutifan, is that the side effect profile is different than the immunotherapy and the TKI. So when we have side effects that are, different, that means that likely we'll be able to combine. So imagine, two drugs that have both of them hypertension as a problem, but they work differently, but hypertension is common. So when you combine them, you have to be very, very careful. And in the past, this has led to several combinations being completely dead, like sunitinib and bevacizumab, Sutent and Avastin, they could not be combined. So here, when you have different side effect profile, you can combine a drug. And this drug was used in clear cell renal cell cancer, but it's also used in a familial syndrome called von Hippel-Lindau that in addition to renal cell cancer has other tumors that are not really cancer, are more vascular tumor, like the vascular tumor in the brain, in the cerebellum, in the spine, that also led to shrinkage, another proof of principle. So that's another agent.
Yeah, it's a beautiful drug. The simple truth is I have patients in my clinic who have to think about what their side effects are. Okay, so that is just spectacular. I think it's really unique. I think it's going to be one of the most promising targeted therapies in kidney cancer, period. Again, 25% response rate, 60% stability of disease. There's one trial I think is very interesting right now that is just a single agent testing 2 different doses. It's not in every state, unfortunately, but that's the trial that's rapidly accruing. And it's the regular dose and actually a higher dose because they never really had dose-limiting toxicity when mostly by pharmacokinetics. So I think that would be a very interesting opportunity to look at.
Good. So I'm trying to see, we might have time for another question in this section. There were a couple of questions that sort of combined here. So this one I think may have been partially answered, but with the novel HIF2 drug being so well tolerated with promising clinical outcomes in early trials, do you expect to see more drugs in this class being developed? Who would like to give that a try? Tian, you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, when one works, I'm sure there are others that come with it. So we'll see. I think there are others in the pipeline, not privy to them myself. Tony, Hans, any insights?
Yeah, I'm sure that's drug development. You have a class of agent that work, it's a no drug alone left policy, so there will be other that are coming. I'm aware of several, already with preclinical work. I don't know of any patient being dosed, which is a good thing. We can always improve, if we stopped at, the first VEGF TKI get approved, like sorafenib, we would never have had cabozantinib or lenvatinib, which are way superior drugs, for example. So I think that will be a good thing, and I'm sure it's gonna come and be tried in patients.
I think when you drug the undruggable, it gives people confidence to try to drug it even better.
Good. All right, well, let's take a move on to the immunotherapy questions. I think we've got Meryl on the line here from Atlanta. Is Meryl out there? I think I see you. You want to come on up?
Yep, and I'm unmuted, I think. Hi, guys. My name's Meryl. I'm in Atlanta. I work with Dr. Belan at Emory, and very excited to be attending this town hall and working with KidneyCAN. What I wanted to know is, what do we know about the durability of the complete responses for TKI IO responders?
Yeah, I can start if you like, Meryl. Nice
Sure.
to see you.
Hi.
I don't have the breakdown per se for the complete responders. Tony can correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, the duration of response depends on the combination, 20, 25 months. In general, for some of the combinations, we still have to wait for them. Again, you know, the CR, you know, when it's really exciting for the first time to really see CRs in the double digits, it's not everything. So let me give you an example. You know, if you are on Nivo-Ipi, for example, and you have tumor shrinkage by more than 50%, you behave very similar to people who actually have a CR. So depth of response is important, but depth of response is not, it's just not everything. And it doesn't need to be completely disappearing. You know, and so we do know that if you have a nice deep response, we already know you're going to do typically much, much better than somebody who's just stability or some signal of mixed activity. Then we get more nervous that the benefit will not be long lasting. Tony, do you have any information?
Yeah, sure. I think, you know, what we call the IO TKI combination, you know, they just, I would say, the data in terms of follow-up is just coming. We saw just from clear the first data, we have to follow patient for a longer time. This cannot be compared to Checkmate 214. I would think also the one problem is that when you do Checkmate 214 result and Nivo-Ipi, you're only after 3 months on one drug, anyway, maintenance, where when you're on the oral drug, the TKI and the IO, they're both continued at the same time. So it's hard to, you know, tease out. But there is something with the CTLA-4 that Hans talked about that gives you probably that extra 10 to 15% response that tend to be durable. And the beautiful thing about it is that if you're able to give it for 3 months, you know, you are done. So I think people in general that achieve a complete response, when there is an immunotherapy drug as part of it, whether 2 or 1, you know, are the folks that gonna do the best. The bigger question is, can you stop the immunotherapy? When do you stop the immunotherapy? And is the doctor and the patient comfortable stopping? So it's easy if you have an immune-related side effects that was serious enough, you stop, say, look, I could continue again, restart if something happened. But if you're not, it's a discussion. In my practice, I stop after 2 years, but there are a lot of times I felt uncomfortable or the patient felt uncomfortable, and we continued very well. By the way, Dr. Zhang might want to add something that on the pedigree study in the CR arm, we are testing 1 year, right? You want to add something, Tian?
Sure, absolutely. So I fully agree with my colleagues. You know, we probably have the most follow-up from Checkmate 214 and not enough about the patients who do extremely well on the VEGF IO combinations. And so in part, that's what drove our pedigree study to write for prospective discontinuation. So in a cooperative group, it's much easier and better to test prospective stopping treatment than industry studies where treatment is given until disease progression. And so I do think it's a very pertinent question. You know, it does warrant a lot of discussion in our clinics to stop treatment. You know, sometimes stopping and withholding is just as hard a decision to make as starting. But I do think in a good number of patients who have a complete response or very deep partial response, they can have treatment-free intervals, but close monitoring monitoring, every 3-month scans after stopping, and then also making sure to jump on any recurrence or progression would be very important to make sure that you continue that follow-up with your oncologist if that's a decision made. In Pedigree, we do a prospective stop at 1 year for anybody with a complete response. And we'll see, we'll have more data to come in the coming years.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, well, we're coming down to the final 10 minutes here, and I think we've got a guest coming in from Ohio, or 2 guests coming in from Ohio. So let's see if we can bring up Susan and Gary.
I'm glad to be with you tonight. One reason we selected ourselves is Gary was diagnosed in 2007. And we remember how much it mattered to us to find long-term survivors. And so we've been working with Dr. Hammer since we lost our last doctor. Gary's a trial warrior, and we have a 2-part question, and I'll ask the first part. I work a lot with patients looking for trials. And, with all these great new first-line options, is it going to start to be harder to get accrual, to get people to enroll in the first and second line trials because they have other good options?
Yeah, I think it's an outstanding question, Susan. First of all, congratulations, Gary, and good to see you guys. And thank you for all the work you're doing for the kidney cancer community. So thank you very much. So the good news is we have now really a plethora, a richness of combinations. And that means hopefully, the message that immunotherapy belongs in the first line is trickling throughout all the even small little private practices, if you will, and patients will receive the combination because they will clearly do better. Unfortunately, there's still some patients who get started on TKI monotherapy, so hopefully that will go away, and at least the combination. But you're absolutely correct. And that's what I'm saying. Unfortunately, it's difficult to actually get the newly diagnosed patients because they get diagnosed, they want to start something, they see the numbers, they look great. And, it's so easy to sort of start a trial, to start a treatment that looks promising instead of taking a little bit extra time to maybe ask, hey, is a clinical trial in this space? There's certainly clinical trials coming. It will be more challenging to develop triple combinations and try to beat some of these very successful doublets, but we need to make headway. So we cannot stop there. There will be triplet therapies coming. How to reach patients who were just diagnosed, I think that's going to be the challenge, to encourage them to inquire about clinical trials. So I do think it will be a touch harder, but my hope is that the message goes through and patients will still inquire.
Great. Gary, did you have a second question there?
Yes. Just wondering if there's much in the way of third line, or in my case, well beyond third line trials coming down the pike.
There's a lot of guys like him.
No, we are all the time.
Yeah, let me take that, Gary, and good to see you doing well. But know well that it's not just Hans, it's Susan who takes all the credit here. No doubt, to this beautiful community she's helping us with. We always try to push for trials when the first line, it's not working. The F2 inhibitor now is in second, third, fourth line, and there are others. And I can tell you when there are new drugs and new targets, usually they are used later lines treatment. That has been the paradigm and will stay largely. But I want to, I think it's important also to stay focused on first line and maximize treatment, whether done in a smart way where we find the right patient for the right drug, or in a smart way, but maybe a bit less when we combine all of them, which is still very fine, and hopefully provide major responses so you do not need that second and third line treatment. The other thing I want to add here is that one of the vexing thing in kidney cancer is we did not have an appropriate, good adjuvant treatment that extend overall survival and provide meaningful benefit. You know, patient have surgery, the tumor is out, but we know there are at risk of the cancer coming back. So finally now with the new immune checkpoint inhibitor, we have several trials ongoing. 2 of them, to my knowledge, finished accrual even. And then, you know, if now we have also a signal that we can prevent the cancer from coming back, that also gonna be big.
Good. Well, great. Hey, I just got a note. We've got, it looks like, Tony, one of your cousins might be calling in from Massachusetts. He's sending in a message. Let me see if he's available.
The Schwery family is big, is very big. Oh, whoa. That's not a cousin, that's like a brother.
Oh, yeah. And I was going to ask you how Uncle Rich is. I haven't seen him since
Wow,
COVID.
it's such a small word, Sean, right?
Hello, everybody. And I've got my other reason for surviving besides Dr. Schwery.
No doubt.
I
The
think
main reason.
She just wanted to say hello to you.
Hi, Tony.
So, Sean, you got a question, I bet, in there somewhere. You want to
Yeah,
tell people?
I'm gonna ask it. I just want to give a little background first, though. I'm a little further in seniority rank over Gary. Yesterday was my 14th anniversary of diagnosis. So I've officially started my 15th year as a stage 4. I was bilateral, multifocal, liver, lung, ribs, spine. I was in bad shape when I started. So if there's any newbies out there listening in, don't give up faith. These guys are doing amazing jobs, you know, and thank you, Brian, and all the other doctors here. But especially Dr. Schwery, who is like a brother to me.
Well,
So
you
I
also taught me a lot, Sean, how to advocate, you know, and I think you set the example very high for all our patients here, you know, to be advocate, to honestly look for trial, to look for doctors that do that disease, to partner with others, to know, I don't know when you don't know, and to just continue the hope. You know, Sean is a great example, and he saw the light and is alive that him and Dr. Kalin together were the, you know, the stars of that meeting, remember? And I was like, no, don't be in that picture, Tony. Just let me have it with Dr. Kalin. So we all want to live to this.
So yeah, earlier you made the comment about the first line therapy, and I'm still on first line. I'm a Sutentaholic. I've been on it since 2007. Well, we came off of it briefly, but that's another story. But so my question is this, Tony, we've been together pretty much since your first day at Dana-Farber. And back then it was Sutent and Nexavar and so many new treatments, not only drug treatments, but things like MR guided SBRT and cryoablations have come along. Do you think that you will ever see a cure? And the second part of that question is, do you think it will happen while you're still young enough to start your second career as a professional soccer player?
I think we will see the cure. I mean, I'm making this live. I think we will. I think we need to hope to see the cure, and I think we will. I think from where I started, I remember it's a trajectory. I remember the first review article. I was a second year resident with my good friend Tom Hudson, now was a chief fellow at Cleveland Clinic, now works with Hans in Dallas, with my mentor at that time, Dr. Bukowski, one of the founders of really the field, the fathers of the field. We talked about pegylated interferon. That's what we had. And 80% of what I was writing was about hepatitis and trying to apply it. And look where we are now, a 71% response rate with pembrolizumab, Nivo-Ipi sarcomatoid, 19% response. We have HIF2 inhibitor. We have triplet and maybe quadruplet. We have CAR T cells. People are talking CAR T cells in kidney cancer. Like since when? So I think will every patient be cured? Probably not. Will we have, patients that are be cured that are not handful, like in the high dose IL-2? Absolutely. And that's why we continue that journey. And I hope I never move to a next career that we continue kidney, because, I'm not young anymore.
You are to us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sean. Appreciate you coming on. Thank you, Dr. Schreier. Right then, I'm going to ask everybody in a 1 to 2 sentence summary for those who are out there listening. Can you give us 1 or 2 sentences of a summary? We'll start with Hans, and then we'll go to Tian, and then Brian, and then we'll wrap up Tony. So Hans, what do you say?
I think the future is bright. I think there are many new treatment options. Never forget to ask about clinical trials, and do what you can to help the kidney cancer community. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Tian?
Great landscape of treatment options. I think patients should work with their oncologist to figure out what the best option is. Certainly we're partial to trials. Pedigree, Cosmic 313, Pivot 09 are all enrolling now. And certainly I think welcome any kidney cancer patient to seek second opinions and look for trials that are available close to them. Really appreciate all you're doing for the kidney cancer community. Thanks.
Thank you, Tian. Brian?
I think things are bright, and I think kidney cancer is the hottest field. I think our colleagues are very jealous of all the progress which we've been making, and I think partnering with KidneyCAN and the various groups has really been a big benefit. It's really stimulated research funding, got in a whole new generation of people involved, and there's a lot of things that really partnership between investigators and their patients. It's essential for us to kind of learn and develop kind of new approaches to this disease.
Thank you, Brian. Tony, any last minute comment?
In addition to my colleague, I have nothing to add. Just don't lose hope. And if we, the 4 of us here, the doctors that treated, one day have a bad day, remind us not to lose hope and cheer us, because we're here. This is a passion we do. This is a commitment, and we want to team up with all of you. Be your own advocate, like Sean and like everyone here, like Gary and Susan. And we're here for you, and they will be even brighter and brighter days. You know what? Because the days 10, 15, years ago when we thought with targeted treatment, suddenly we called them novel agent for 10 years, not novel anymore. Now we have really novel agent. In the future, we're going to continue to have novel agent.
Great. Well, thank you so much for each of you for taking time out, and thank you all that are watching in tonight. We really appreciate that. We appreciate you taking the time listening. Hope this was helpful. We've got some more information at our website. As you saw tonight, having long-term survivors is the name of the game right now, and we're really excited to see people like Sean and Gary come on and give everybody hope. So thank you for that. Thanks for all the panelists. Thanks for all of the questions that came in. For everybody out there, stay healthy, wash your hands, hopefully get a vaccine, and we'll see you in the future in person. Thanks for joining us tonight. Take care.